guys, it's Robin, RsIslandCrafts. Welcome to my craft room. Today I want to talk about rice bags, rice heating packs. I've been wanting to make some rice heating pads, heating bags. It's whatever you want to call it. They are kind of like a bag and it's also a pad, however you want to look at it. But I've been wanting to make some of these for the house for a bit. Hubby and I both have like sore muscles. We have some chronic pain issues and it's nice to have a heating pad on it. But with a heating pad, you've kind of got to like drag it out of the closet. You got to hook it up and plug it in, and you get those cords tangled up. And it's got that big fat piece with the thick cord that's always right in the back of my head when I want to put it on my shoulders. And while I have a nice one that's kind of form-fitting and you can kind of smush it around, if you make an actual rice pack, you can really... I have this one is pretty loose, so the rice can just flow in there, and you can put the rice any way you want. So if you want to heat it up and put it on your elbow or something, you can easily do that. And with the rice pack versus a heating pad, when this cools down, it cools down. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to plug it in. You have to be careful that you don't make it too hot. But the same thing with a heating pad. You can crank that baby up to high, and it can get really, really warm, really, really hot. I really kind of wanted something that my husband could put on the back of his neck when his neck is just getting a little tight and sore, or on the days when he's cold and he just can't seem to warm up. He can always stick this underneath his one of his blankets he's wearing. He can put it on his arms when his arms are cold. You can put it on your feet when your feet are cold. You can slide it into your bed and warm up the sheets and everything before you get in. So I wanted to make some of these, and I thought maybe you guys might want to make some with me. Now, there's a variety of ways you can make one. Just like any other project, there's always different ways. I chose to make an insert for mine. So what I have in here is I just have a fabric pouch that I made. Now, don't laugh at me, but we're deciding how much rice to put in them. So I wrote right on my little pack here, 2 cups of rice. So when I make a couple different ones and with a different variety of amounts of rice in it, and I say, hey Rob, which one you like better? He could say, I like this one better than this one. I can pull it out and say, okay, that's 2 cups of rice in this size bag. This is what I'm going to make from now on. Some of the patterns I was looking at, it recommended just a cup to a cup and a half of rice for the same size bag. But there's not... It was really, really thin, and when I went like this, it was such a thin layer. It was like the rice was just laying flat. So I put 2 cups of rice in, and it's one of those things that you're going to have to determine how much. This whole project is really arbitrary to however you want to use it, what size you need, and how much rice you want. Now, as you can see, if I were to put this over my wrist, all the rice is going to slide down to 2 sides here, and it's going to be all loosey-goosey like that. We kind of want it for what we're going to use it for. We want it nice and loose like this. If you want your rice to stay put, then you're going to need a different process where you're going to make channels and you're going to stitch channels down into your rice pack like this so that the rice stays in those channels. But we wanted one that I can just throw over my shoulder. Rob can put around his neck and he can put down with his feet or something. So the one I'm going to show you today is all loosey-goosey. So what type of things do you need for this? I made a cover for ours. That way, it's kind of going on your body parts. So if it gets kind of sweaty and gunky, or if it gets dropped on the floor, or if you're drinking hot cocoa while using it and you spill it, you kind of want to be able to wash this. So I am making a cover for ours. I have cotton fabric, and I am using cotton thread, because this is going to be going in the microwave. Now, microwaves vary. I read that you can put it in for 1 to 2 minutes. Some people put theirs in for 4. I cooked ours, this first one here, for 2 minutes, and it was burning hot. We couldn't use it. We couldn't touch it. It was way too hot. So for us in our microwave, it's just 1 minute. So I recommend when you get this all done to throw it in your microwave for a minute, test it out. If it's not hot enough, then cook it for another minute, and then if it's nice, then 2 minutes. And you can even write right on here, 2 minutes in the microwave. That way the directions are there all the time and you'll always know it. So I have cotton fabric for my cover, something fun. Rob loves the Giants. I have cotton fabric for my actual rice bag insert, and I used the same old simple a light gray thread to do both of them. You're not going to see the thread except for where we're going to do this little thing here. This is basically just like one of those when you put a pillow insert in it and you have you have it folded over so you can tuck it in. So we have our cotton fabric. I have my cotton fabric, cotton thread, and I just went up to Walmart and I just picked up, I got long grain enriched rice, 2 pounds. Plain old simple white rice. You want to make sure you're not getting the instant rice, that boil in the bag stuff. You want to get the stuff you need to actually cook for like 20 minutes and put it in a rice cooker or whatever. This thing was pretty well full, and I ended up putting, as you see, 2 cups in there. And this is probably, let's see if it says. So there's about 5 cups of rice in here. But I actually did just measure it with my measuring cup. I filled it up with 1.5 cups of rice, put it in there. It wasn't enough. I filled it up, put 2 cups of rice in there, and it felt just right. So as you can see, you can make a variety of them out of here. So let's move these out of the way and let's talk about them. So the first thing I had to do is I had to decide what size rice bag did I want. I knew I wanted a long rectangular one, and I kind of wanted it to be able to maybe go from the shoulder to the elbow. I looked at a bunch of different patterns, and one of them suggested to cut a 12-inch square. Well, 12-inch square and all is great, but I've got a 12.5-inch ruler. So I went ahead and just cut out one square at 12.5 inches. Because what we're going to do is we're going to fold it over like this. That way you don't have to have, you can have 2 separate pieces. If you know exactly, like you want to have something that's 6 inches square, then you can cut out 2 pieces of 6-inch fabric. Or if you know you want a long rectangular one, you can just go ahead and cut it by the length and then just double the width, because then we'll just fold it over. We'll take it to the sewing machine and we'll stitch it here. We're going to stitch all the way down here. And then I left this end open. Any of the ends you can leave open. If you prefer, you can leave it open here. But I found that if I just left this end open and I stitched all the way around, then I can just take my rice, pour it in here, and you see how you can shake all your rice down? And then I can just put this underneath my sewing machine and stitch it. So I'm going to stitch it here and here, leave it open, and flip it right side out. So let's go ahead and take this over to the sewing machine, and I'll just show you real quick how fast it is to just stitch around it. This would be a fun project if you wanted to do something with the kids or a new sewer. You don't even have to make them this big. You can go ahead and just use 2 pieces, maybe a charm pack of 5-inch squares or 6-inch squares, where you can make them without a cover. If you make them nice and small, then you can have little hand warmers so you can put them in your jacket pocket when you're going off to the bus stop for the kids or something. And then they can just have a nice little simple project to work on. And you can get it done in really less than an hour if you're working with the kids. I would imagine it wouldn't take too long. And that way they have a finished project that they can actually have and use, and it won't take all day and they won't lose patience. So here's my folded edge. I'm going to go ahead and leave that just like that. I'm just using the side of my presser foot. This is a little bit more of it's a generous 1/4 inch. It's a little bit more than a 1/4 inch, so I couldn't use this if I was actually quilting. I'd need to move my needle over a little bit. I think when you're sewing inside something like this and you're making a casing, it's okay to go ahead and use a larger seam allowance, a little bit more of a generous 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, whatever it feels like to you. But I like to just go ahead and use the side of my presser foot. That's usually enough for me. Now when you're stitching to the corner, you can either stop at your seam allowance, a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch from the corner, or sometimes I just go ahead and stitch right off the edge. I bring up my needle, I turn my project, and then I start back in the seam allowance so that I make sure I'm going to cross over the seam I just did. And in this section, I don't worry about back stitching because I am going across the seam and that's going to lock it in. I'm on the opposite side of the fold so I can still stitch straight down. If you'd wanted to leave a opening on the side here, you'd go ahead and stitch down for a little bit. You'd back stitch, and then you'd skip a space so that you would have an opening, and then you'd once again backspace. That way when you're filling it up, you don't rip the seam, and then you continue sewing. But since I'm not going to be doing that, I'm going to leave my opening at the end. I'm going to cut my thread here. Just going to pop this extra thread so I can finish the seam. And then I'll go ahead and stitch to the end. Once again, I stitched off the edge here. I'll go ahead, maybe I'll just back stitch a little just to secure it. And I left my third side here open. So I'm going to go ahead and take this over to the table again, and I'm going to fill this up with rice. Well, I'm not going to fill it up. That would be a lot of rice. And then I'll show you the next step. So we have our insert for our rice. We have one end open. We've stitched all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and just clip this corner. I didn't really clip it on the first one because it's a lining and it's not going to really matter too much. Now, as you know, I'm making this for ourselves for at home. I do sew a little bit differently sometimes if I'm going to be selling this product. Like, I just have a random piece of fabric that I don't really care much about for the center. You can use muslin. That's always a good option. Something that's, you don't want to use something really important and fancy that you spent $15 a yard on if you're going to use it as a lining fabric and you're never going to see it. Now for us, I probably wouldn't even bother snipping this. And I don't care what color my threads are, but if I was going to be selling this in my shop, I would take a little bit more care. Now I'm doing everything just right like I would be supposed to if I was going to make this a sell, but sometimes I just wouldn't care. Like, I don't care what color this is, if I used a couple different colored fabrics, if my thread is a leftover piece and it's hot pink or something, or purple. But if I were stitching it to sell or to give as a gift, I want to give it the best presentation I can. I'm never going to shortchange on quality, but sometimes I just might use scraps. A lot of the patterns I saw, they had you stitching up, like I showed you how to stitch on the side and just leave a little bit open, and then they had this open part here that you'd have to put the rice in. But I really don't see the point of that, especially since this is going to be on the inside of the lining of it's going to be the lining pouch for the rice. Why not just make it easier on ourselves and leave this completely open? So when I turn it, I still will pop out the corners a little bit with my fingers. Sorry, I still had you guys all zoomed in. So I just kind of pop them out. I'm not too concerned about this. If I were, I could go ahead and take a dull pair of scissors that aren't too sharp. I just be really careful. I can use that to gently pop out the corner. If you've seen me do these things before, you know I like to use a plastic crochet hook, but it's on the other side of the room. I just gently and carefully pop out the corner so I have a nice sharp corner there. I could always press it with the iron, but I'm not going to worry about any of that right now. So I give myself a little fold over just to make it easier to put the rice in. I was careful and I only opened up a little bit. If you're going to be making a lot of these for gifts, just go ahead and get yourself maybe an old ice cream container, or even something like one of these ice cream containers. You can pour your whole bag of rice in it, and then you can easily scoop it out with the measuring cup. But for me, I'm just going to go ahead and pop a little hole here, fill this up. At this point, if you wanted to make this and put some essential oils in there, put a little lavender, dried lavender, or whatever kind of smelly stuff you have, now's a good time to do it. If you have to have it, like, I don't know if with essential oils, if you have to let it soak into the rice for a little bit first, I'm not sure. You can always put it in a Ziploc bag and then go like this and knead it all so the smell goes everywhere. One of the things Rob and I did notice with this, that as you're pouring this rice, and I'm not worried about being exact because I can always add a little extra or take a little out. Go ahead and smell your rice. It smells like rice as you'd expect it to smell, as dried rice. When you heat this up in the microwave for the first few times, I'm not sure exactly how many it's going to take, but you are going to smell rice. It's going to have that specific scent, so it might be a good idea if you want to have a little essential oils in there to give it a nice smell. Vanilla or a little cinnamon or something. Whatever is safe that can go in the microwave. You guys, if you're doing those things, you know what you can use and what you can't. As you can see, that rice only took up this little bit down here. What I did now is I took this and I folded it over, and I could put some clips on it. You can use some pins if that's what you have. You can use some clothespins. And then I took it out to Rob and I'm like, okay, here, let's test this out. How does it feel? Do you think you've got enough rice in it? Does it feel comfortable? And then you'll know if you need to add a little bit more rice or not to put any more rice in. I take my little clippies off. So I know I have the amount of rice I like in there. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to arbitrarily, now mine has this design on it, the fabric, so I know I can just kind of fold it over. You can measure it. But really, once again, if you're just making this for family and for around the house, you can just kind of guesstimate on how it is. You can put some pins or some clippies on it. I just folded it over once. I'm going to seal this up with the sewing machine. Just want to make sure that I have enough tucked in there. I wouldn't do maybe a 1/4 inch. I'd definitely go for a 1/2 inch or more. As you see, I didn't even measure mine. Because at this point, I am only making my pouch. I am not making my cover yet. I just have my fabric that I'm going to use set aside. So after I get this all sewn up and stitched, then I'll go ahead and measure everything and I'll know exactly what size I need to make for my cover. But for right now, we're just going to go ahead and talk about just making this inside portion. So I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and I'm actually going to put 2 rows of stitching on here because I want to make sure that it's held in good. And on top of that, because if you have children, or if you have a husband who likes to throw things around and just go like this and pop it back and forth in your hand, I'm actually going to stitch around all 4 sides to make sure everything's going to be secure in there and there's no chance of the rice popping out. If my seam becomes weak anywhere and threads pop, I'm going to have that extra outline stitching all the way around that's going to hold it in. So let's head back to the sewing machine and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now, if you have your sewing machine sunk down into your desk or your table, or if you have one of those extended tables that go on the side, that might be a little helpful right now because I didn't struggle, but I did have to deal with the weight of the rice sitting down here. Now, for the most part, it's not that big of a deal. I can always put it on the right-hand side of my needle. I'm just used to everything on the left, and it's just to warn you that you could struggle just a little bit with your rice. I'm going to actually take my clips off because the rice, my pouch is long enough that it's just sitting there. If this were a smaller pouch, what I would want to do is I'd want to make sure my rice was all the way to the end somewhere, and I can put some pins all along here to hold it down. Like when you're making the stuffies and stuff, when you're using those little plastic pellets, you just kind of put some pins through here, and then it'll hold it all down there, and it'll stay out of your way up here. So I'm going to take my first row of stitching and I'm going to put it right against my presser foot again. Stitch a little. This time, yes, I did start almost at the end and then I back stitched. You know, I'm just one of those sewers. Sometimes you do it one way, sometimes you do another, depending on the situation. But I know since I'm going to be stitching all the way around that I'm going to catch that line there and seal the stitching anyways. And then there's my first line. I've pretty much caught it now. But what I want to do the next time is I'm going to go between the seam, the stitching line that I just stitched there, and I'm going to go halfway between here and the edge and put my secondary stitch right along there. And this time when I get to the end, I'm going to go ahead and go all the way around this little pouch, just kind of moving the rice out of the way as I need it to be moved. That, of course, is the easy one. Now I have this whole bulk of the rice here, and I'm just going to try to move it and manage it as I go around this pouch. You could take it and pin it all the way down there, and then when you go around the other side, you can take it and pin it all the way over here. But I'm just going to try to hold it so it stays off the sewing machine table. I'm not 100% sure if I've stitched through any rice or if as I'm stitching the needle moves the rice out of the way, but I didn't have too many problems, or I didn't have any problems really except for trying to move the rice around. Now when you're going around this time, you can go ahead and just use your 1/4 inch seam if you'd like, a little bit extra. Just get the rice out of the way and just kind of hold it with my hand so it stays over there. At this point, I don't want the rice pulling hard on my needle. I don't want to have any issues with that. I was just thinking that if you didn't want to go through this whole problem of stitching it around again when the rice is in it, before you put the rice in it, we could turn the bag inside out and we can stitch along the outside edge, top stitch on these 3 sides. Then after the rice goes in, we can go ahead and tuck the top in and do our 2 stitches there. And this top stitching will have already been done and you won't have to play with the rice. That's one of those little tips and tricks you learn as you're making a project that you can use on the next project. Readjust my rice. I think that would definitely make it a lot easier. It's not like it's hard. Oh. Makes it even harder when you run out of bobbin thread. I meant to check that before I got going, but I was just trying to use up every little bit that I had and I forgot to check it. We all do that, right? It's nothing new. And once again, see, I'm just going to go ahead and use that. Well, maybe I should put a full one in, right? And I won't have to worry about it. I really love these top load bobbins. So it's kind of right at the edge there. I think maybe I'll start back here. Stitch over this line again. And that way I know I don't have any spots where I missed any. This is the outside of it, so the top stitching, it's not going to matter too much if I missed a spot. But why take a chance, right? I think I just stitched through a piece of rice. If you have rice that's in the way, just go slow. Back to the table. We have our rice pouch all sewn. We have the amount of rice that we feel that we like in there because we've tested it out. I've done a double top stitching around the opening where the rice went in, just in case. And then I went ahead and I top stitched all around the edge. Now as you can see here, my back fabric came around a little to the front because I was fighting with the rice. But if we'd gone ahead and top stitch this before we put the rice in and gave it a good press with the iron, then we wouldn't run into that problem. And that's why I usually recommend you do a test project first to see how it goes and see if there might be a little problem where you'll have a hiccup and where you'll learn to do something easier on your actual projects. And if you do a test one first, then you won't be heartbroken if something happens and you did something wrong with the fabric. If you made your liner too big or too small. Too big is easy to fix, too small is a little harder. And then you could, like I said, you can learn those tips and tricks on how to get this done right. But once again, as I said, I'm making this for my husband Rob and I, and we're okay. We're okay if our liner, if the fabric came a little bit over in this area and it wasn't perfectly flat. To be totally honest with you, Rob is not going to notice. I'm not even going to worry about trimming these little threads unless it actually bothers me, which it wouldn't have bothered me until I said it. But now that I've said it, now I have to trim it. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to figure out how to make our cover for it. So if you've ever made a cover for a couch pillow, a throw pillow, however you want to call it, where you do the envelope, the overlapping side where you have a piece of fabric here and a piece of fabric here that overlaps, and it makes this little opening here to put your rice bag in. So I made ours so it can just pop this rice bag in. Now because you've got rice, the more rice that's in there, sometimes it gets a little bit harder to do it. But since this one I can fit my hand in, I just kind of grab the two corners here and here with my fingers inside, make sure they kind of go down in there. And then I have this flap, this little area that I can just pull from underneath. Where are you? I was testing it out to see what sizes work good and which work best for me, and this one's a little bit long, but that's okay. I just tuck my corners back in there, and then this piece, the inside flap goes over the outside flap. Now sometimes when you're doing these with a throw pillow, your flap whatever it's called is only just a little bit, an inch or two. But because Rob's going to be putting it on his body and it's got this movability and this flow to it, I wanted to make sure that I had a good decent amount of my flap here, my overlap, that's what it's called. And it ended up being about 3 inches for me by the time everything was all sewn together. So let me show you how I figured out how to make my cover. Since we're just doing this without following a pattern and we're making it to whatever size we want, if you wanted a big long one, if you wanted a square, I just went ahead and made my pouch, made my rice packet here. And I took a tape measure and I measured it. Or I put it on my mat and I measured it. Now this came out to be 11.5 by almost 6 inches. So I'm just going to say it's 11.5 by 6. Now the first piece I want to cut is I want to cut this back piece or the front, however you want to look at it, the one that's all one solid piece. And if this was 11.5 by 6, I want to add in some seam allowances. Now I already told you I kind of fudged it and it wasn't an exact 1/4 inch, but since we're making a rice pack, it can be a little bit loose or it can be a little bit tight. Now since my rice is flowing around everywhere, I decided that if this was 11.5 by 6, that I would just go ahead and cut my back piece at 12 by 6.5. Now I wanted my fabric so it would look like this, so when he's putting it on his arm or his leg or whatever, you can see the giant's fabric. If you have directional fabric, you need to decide which way you want to do it. Sometimes it's easier just to use non-directional fabric and you don't have to worry about that. And one of the things you can do to kind of make sure you're doing it right the first time before you cut into it, you can decide where you're going to put it. Let me cover up that light. You're going to decide where you're going to put it and what size fabric you're going to get. So I've got the 12 by 6.5. I would line it up on my 12 by 6.5, and before I cut my fabric, I'd go ahead and take my rice pack and I would just lay it on there, and just to make sure that I can see fabric all the way around the edges. That way I know that maybe you're sewing this at 2, 3 in the morning because you can't sleep, or because you're up studying for college exams, or the kids are just being kids and you want to do something in the middle of the night while they're sleeping. This gives you that visual to see that you've got enough space all the way around it. And for those of you that are really good at just doing numbers and cutting it and you don't have to worry about it, just measure this, add in a seam allowance all the way around. So since mine was 6, I gave a 1/4 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on this side. And as I said, this is a very fluid pouch, so if you make it a little too small or a little too big, the rice is going to flow and fill in the space either way. So there's my back. Now I'm going to need 2 pieces to go over here. And I decided for me that I'm going to go ahead and make it, I made my long one, I made it 6.5 inches wide because that number is not going to change. And then I went ahead and I went with 10 inches here. Because what I'm going to do on both of these pieces is I'm going to fold them over twice and give them a little bit of a cuff. And then I just went ahead and I made this one 6.5 by 7.5, and once again I'm going to fold this a double folded seam like this. Now I have mine so that the short one is in there and there's the long one, so that I have a spot where I can open it up, tuck it in, and then cover it back up like this. Now these numbers are really arbitrary. You can go ahead What you want to do is you just want to make sure you have a 2 or 3 inch overlap. So if you want to put it right here in the center, and we decided that our pouch was 12 inches, so maybe you wanted it to go right here at 6, right? That's where you want your opening, right in the center. And you're going to go ahead and fold it under a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch is a nice fold. It'll make this edge that you could be opening and up closing often if you need to change the cover a lot. It'll make it nice and sturdy. But a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch, so you have a total of a 1/2 inch added to it, is perfectly fine. So if I know if I want to go to 6 inches and I want to fold it and have it 2 1/4 inch folds, then I want to cut my piece 6 1/2 inches. If I don't want to worry about, I want to fold it and just fold it and not pay attention to the measurements, maybe I would go ahead and cut it to 7, and then I'd make a wider fold just so it's easier to fold it over. I'll show you how to do all that, and I'll show you how to stitch it, so that's fine. We're just figuring out our math here. So if we go ahead and we cut our long piece, and we've decided, for me, I've decided that mine's going to be up to this 10 inches. Then the next piece is just as easy to figure out. You're going to measure it from your end again, and if you're going into the center, now remember, we're going to have a 2 to 3 inch overlap. So for me, I want to go ahead, and I made mine go all the way up to, I did 6 1/2 by 7 1/2. So I made mine all the way up to here, because I ended up with a really big overlap. So if you don't want it so big that it overlaps all the way into here, then you just go a little bit different. You can take this, and if you know you're going to be folding it down, do your little double fold, maybe put some pins in it, and you can see exactly where that's going to be. So then I know I need to go from here, and this is about at 3, there we go, we're at 3 inches here, so I want to add 2 inches for my overlap, and then I want to add a 1/2 inch or an inch for folding it under. So then I know I'm going to go ahead and make this at the width, which is 6 1/2, up to 6. Now I know you can find many patterns online. They're going to give you the numbers of everything you need, and you don't have to worry about this at all. But if you're just going with some weird shape and you want to figure this out for yourself, that's the way I did it. Do whatever works for you. All our minds think differently, but I like to have the visual like this so that I can see that when I have everything all set, I'm going to look like that, and I'm going to be good. Now, I am not worried about lining up and matching my fabric. This is going to be on the back. He's going to put it down like this, and see this? I didn't even care that things are over. He's got a helmet and a helmet. He's good, right? It's the feel of the fabric. If you want to go and have everything specially placed, you're going to be using your see-through ruler to cut it. Just kind of move your ruler around to make sure it's where you want it to be. So I want to take you over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to show you, we're going to go ahead and press this under twice. I'm going to show you how I top stitch this, and then we're going to stitch it all together. So I've gone ahead and I gave my fabrics a nice good pressing. Make sure everything's nice and flat. This is my back piece. I'm going to set this aside for now. And these are my two, my back piece, well, back front, however you will look. This is where the little pouch is. Now, if we were going to be making these as gifts and we were going to be making them to sell, I have this little metal ruler from, this is the Dritz Easy Hem, and it allows you to have an exact measurement. So if you want to go ahead and press, since it's metal, you can line up your fabric to the line that you need to press it at. This one happens to be a 1/2 inch. Give it a good press and a little steam, and it's going to go ahead and hold your seam for you right there. Everything's going to be nice and measured and even. I can once again take it, bring my seam up. Now this way everything is going to be nice. Like I said, it'll be nice and even. It'll have a very professional look to it, and everything will be nice. Nice. Because when we're making things for gifts or we're making them to sell, we want to have everything even. So I have this, I'll set that aside. I'm just trying to line it up to see which way I want my giants to go. So I'm going to go ahead and press this one. Now if I'm just doing this for Rob and I might just go ahead and just fold over. Sorry about the shadows. I would just fold over about 1/4 of an inch, eyeball it, give it a nice press, and then I'd fold it over even with that fold. Once again, just eyeballing it. I know I'm going to be even if when I get to the edges, everything lines up on the side. So depending on whether you're making it all nice and fancy because you need to look very nice, you want to sell it, or you're very particular that everything is nice and even. So as you can see, I have this nice fold here, right? But then again, just eyeballing it, it's not too bad. It's a little hard to tell because I have the Giants with the logo and I have it cut in a weird angle. But if you had just straight blue fabric, it's reasonable. It's a little bit wider on one end than the other, but it's going to be okay. So let me show you how we stitch this down. Now to start with my solid piece here, I do not have to worry about that at all. I'm just going to worry about the part that I hemmed. You can just top stitch right along the edge with just one line, or if you feel like it's going to get a lot of rough and tough tugging and you want to put a second line on it, you can go ahead and do that. I think for this one will be fine. I'm not worried about back stitching at the edge because I'm going to be stitching this together and it'll cover it. And without even cutting my thread, I'm just going to go ahead and do the next one. Now this one might get a little bit more wear and tear, so maybe I might want to put a second line on this one, because this is going to be the one that's on the outside. So that one has this little double. It's a little fancier. It looks nice. A lot of times they don't even do this one underneath, but I think if you're going to have that raw edge, it's a really good idea to fold that under. So here's my back piece. I have it right side up because we're going to do this and sew it all together and then flip it the wrong side out. This is the one, the longer one that I want on the outside. So I'm going to just try to match it up so it's even here. I'll put that one down first because that's the one we're going to see on the outside, and then this little short one tucked in there. So I'm just going to put a couple pins. I have my little clips here. I'm just going to clip where these extra folds are here. You can go ahead and clip and pin all the way around. I just know that I want to hold these places in place, these spots in place. And now I'm going to just stitch 1/4 of an inch, a little more than 1/4 of an inch, all the way around, because I'm going to be able to turn it inside out from this little flap here. So I'm not going to worry about leaving any openings or anything like that. So let's do that. You can start stitching anywhere you want. I find it easier sometimes to start in the middle of one of the short edges, and then I'll just go around and meet back there. Because if you're going to start right in the corner, sometimes it's just, you don't have to deal with going off the edge or having leader enders or pieces get stuck in or anything like that. I'll just start stitching right here. Once again, I'm still using the seam allowance at the side of my foot, which is a generous 1/4 inch. I'm not even going to worry about back stitching because I'm going to stitch right over the line again. This time I'm just going to stop in the corner and pivot. Make sure everything is still staying lined up over here. Now, if you were concerned about any type of rough housing with this, you can always backstitch where these edges are right here, where the flaps are, so that you know it's not going to get pulled at all. Now you have everything stitched. I just went ahead and I trimmed all 4 of my corners just to get rid of that extra bulk that you end up with in the corners there. You just want to be careful that you stay at least 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch away from the corner seam there. Now if you accidentally stitch it and you cut into those stitching there, just go ahead and take it back to the machine and make a new corner there. You can stitch it diagonally across here to save your corner, or you can just make it a little bit smaller. And then it's easy to turn inside to right side out. You just pop your hand into the long part, pull it out. Take whatever it is that you're using to pop your corners out, and of course if you're using scissors or anything sharp, be very careful you don't bust through your seam. And if you do, once again, just turn it the right inside out and restitch it. Now I feel that this is going to be secure enough. If I was worried about, maybe I was making something for kids and I knew they were going to be throwing it around or something, I might go ahead and top stitch all around this again just to hold everything secure. But I don't think it really needs it for your normal everyday wear and tear. If you're making these a sell, you don't want to use extra materials and extra time by top stitching all the way around, but you actually could if you felt that it needed it. Give it a nice pressing, take it over to your iron, press it really well, and then you can just do 1/8 of an inch top stitch all around. But I think that this is perfectly fine. I put my little rice pillow here, lay it down on my arm because this long one, it's easier if I do this. If I were just to take this and dump the rice pouch in there, it gets this big ball down at the bottom, and these corners don't really get into the corners where you want them to be in there. So just kind of hold it with my fingers and in the palm of my hand and get it down in there. Shake it down so that the rice goes into there. Then you pop it into the other section, matching up the corners the best you can. They will move around in there because it's not form-fitting because rice does shift. But if you're going to be putting this on sore muscles, you don't want to have any extra lumps. Ta-da! Now I have 2 rice packs, one for each of Rob's feet or his shoulders. Maybe if he's nice to me, he might let me borrow some, or I'll just make some more for myself. Now within this style, without sewing any of the chambers, just having the loosey-goosey rice in there, this was your most complicated style to make. We made a inner pouch where we put the rice, and then we made a cover so that it can be washed, and we made the overflap here. But I want to go ahead and show you how to make something quick and simple. You can make these little hand warmers that you can warm up in the microwave and put in your pocket or your kids' pockets. So when they're waiting at the bus stop or you're driving in the car, well, not when you're driving in the car, but when they're riding in the car, they can put their hands in their pockets and keep them nice and warm. And I'm going to show you how easy they are. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a flannel hand warmers. Now my hand, if I put it on here, I think maybe a 4-inch little hand warmer would be nice. Maybe if I'm going to make my actual one 4 inches, and then when I take away the seam allowance, it's going to be about 3.5 inches, and that'll give me a nice little piece to put in my pocket to stay nice and warm when I'm outside in the, it doesn't snow in Florida, but if you're sending it away to someone and they like to have their hands nice and warm. So we figure about 4 inches. I have the selvage over here, so I'm just going to go a little bit past that. This is a double thickness of these fun turtles. This is flannel. Looks like it's time to put new blades in. You can make heart shapes. You can do squares, triangles, and circles if you want to help your kids learn their shapes. Make them in different colors. You can put numbers and flowers and designs, and depending on how complicated you want to get. I want to make these nice and simple. So now I have my 2 pieces of 4-inch flannel that I've cut. I'm going to put them right sides together. I'm going to give them a little press to get rid of this little crease here. I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch around 3 sides, and I'm going to leave a little small opening here on the 4th side, and I'm going to back stitch here so that it stays nice and tight. And when we turn it the right side out, we're going to fill this with rice. So let me go ahead and stitch this up real quick, and I'll be right back. I have it stitched all the way around, and I have this little opening here. Can you see where my stitches are? For anyone who's been here for a while, you've seen me do different pin cushions and such. When I have to leave an opening, I like to start at the outside of the fabric and come in a few stitches, and then I stitch all the way around. And then when I get here, I once again pivot my fabric and I stitch off the edge. And I'll show you how helpful that'll be in a second. First, I want to still trim off my corners so I get rid of any of that excess bulk. And since we're doing such a small project here, we don't want to have all that extra. Now I need to go ahead and flip this the right side out. I'm going to use my hemostats to grab this because it's a little bit harder to get your fingers in a small space like that. And then I have my fancy dancy plastic crochet hook for turning, my turning tool. Just going to go in here, gently run it across, pop the corners out if I can. Sometimes when you're working with a flannel, it gets a little bit harder, or if this is, if you're using, remember, if we're going to put this in the microwave, we want to make sure we're using all natural materials. So I don't know, I don't think microfiber, the minky and all that's going to work for this because you need something that's cotton. Now since I turned it, see how my edges right here, my opening just turned right in, so nice and neat like that? Now that's because that I'd gone ahead and I'd stitched on and off the edges when I started. It already makes that seam allowance and it pops it right inside there for you. So you don't have, a lot of times I struggle where I'll get one that'll be out a little bit too far and it's hard to get it in there neatly. But if you do this, look how quick that is. Simple, simple, simple. I think that is worth the price of admission today. Now if you have a funnel, that's what's going to help you a lot here because we're going to still need to put some rice in this. I'm going to try to see how much of a mess I can make by doing it this way. I just shove my little corner of my bag in there. I'm always surprised when it comes to time like this and I never have a funnel. I usually end up rolling up a piece of paper and putting it in there, but I feel like being crazy. Yep, see, nope, can't be crazy today. A paper cup, like one of those little bathroom cups that you can fold, that would be helpful too. So I went to the kitchen and I got a teaspoon and I'm going to try this instead. Yep. Put that right in there. This one maybe you could fill this one up a little bit higher than you would for the heating pad version. I'm going to go ahead and keep filling this up and I'll come back because you guys don't want to watch me do this. All right, all my turtles, I went ahead and I filled it up about halfway. So if I hold this hole, it kind of gives me enough rice in there that when I feel it, I'm not feeling my fingers below it. I'm concerned if you fill it up too much that it might hold too much heat when you put it in your pocket for the small kids. And that should be just enough to warm up and stay warm for about 15 minutes. And just enough time for the bus to get there. So now you can either hand stitch this closed with the ladder stitch, but I'm going to go ahead and take it over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to go ahead and stitch this closed. You can use matching thread. You can stitch if you want to try stitching all the way around so that it looks the same everywhere. But I really don't have any problem. For today, I'm just going to use the gray thread and we'll see how well it matches. I'm going to do the one stitch along here, the one line of sewing, and see what that looks like. Now remember, I used a light gray thread. You can kind of see where I'm stitching anyways, and of course you can see the thread. If I'd have used a light blue, it would have been fine. Now for any of you that are worried about having this stitch line across here, look at the stores when you go out shopping and you find something. Look at the ready to purchase, ready to wear items. You're going to notice when they have stuffed animals and they have pillows and such that they go ahead and they commercially stitch down like this also. They don't worry about doing all of them. They don't always do the nice neat little inside. A lot of times with the stuffed animals, I've seen that they do the overcast whip stitch so you can see all the thread. So I feel very confident and comfortable that if I were to sell this or to give it away to friends and family, that having this line of stitching here is perfectly fine. Now as you can see, it's a little bit loose, not too tight. I'm not sure, you have to test it out to see how long you put it in the microwave to make it nice and warm. Just like if you were going to give your baby a bottle, you wouldn't just give it to him straight out of the pot or the bottle warmer, or back in the day we used a microwave, that you would test it first. So before you give this to your child, don't let them just do it in the microwave themselves. You can go ahead and test it out and see how hot it is. Then they can put this in their pocket or inside their mitten or glove. See, it's nice and small to fit right into my glove if I wore any, and keep my hands nice and warm. Hey guys, it's Future Robin here. I just wanted to pop in and clarify something. There was another reason why I showed you how to make this little turtle guy. You can make this just like this. If you don't want to make a case and a covering for this, you just want to make a rice bag, you can go ahead and use some flannel and make it just the same way that we made this turtle. Just cut it in the size that you'd like. And then you're still going to sew, you'll have to sew your flannel just like we stitched the inside bag in here. Just like I stitched this bag right here, you're going to want to stitch it the same way so that you can have all your sides done and flip it and fill it and then stitch it over the top like that. It's the same process either way, whether you do it this way or that way. It's just a bigger piece. Now this one we use 2 separate pieces. You can use 2 separate for this or make one larger and fold it in half like I did. Alright, thanks guys. Now I know today was more of a rustic project, but sometimes we just have to figure out how these projects go together ourselves without always having an exact pattern. There's going to be times when you want to make a rice pack. You want a heating pack like this, but when you go online, all you can find is these really big monster ones or really tiny ones. So you want one that's going to fit you yourself. So this is how you can draft your own pattern. These are super simple and easy to make. These are great little tuck-ins to go with Christmas presents and if you have winter birthdays and stuff like that. If you want to, it's small and light enough that you can go ahead and give it to a small child and they can use it as a little beanbag toy and toss it around the house. If you want, you can go ahead and, not for keeping warm, but if you were to make this as a little beanbag toy or a little toss-around toy, you could put the polyfiber fill inside like a pillow, and then it's the same process as what we just made. So it's nice to have a whole bunch of these sitting in a basket at your house, so when everyone's ready to go out and play in the snow, you can heat them up in the microwave and pop them in their pockets so when they go out, or they can have them when they come back in, something nice to warm up your hands. I have been in the snow before, so I do know how cold it is, although we don't have that problem down here in Florida. So thank you guys for hanging out with me today and stitching along with me in my craft room, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!